It's always like your birthday with a package from China, so let's go. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's awesome that you're tuning in, because in this video we're going to take a close look at the GT King. There are some things that you need to know. Let's put it aside. So the reason is, I wanted to talk about it nowadays because we're having so many ways to play. And the GT King is still one of the best ways, or there is one, because there are many ways to play. Unfortunately, this thing is man, it looks like awesome when you're looking at the specs. S9 22X, and yeah, there was some awesome things to it. But nevertheless, we do have some limitations to what I want to talk about today. Because when you're looking at it, they also sell it like a Super Console X King thing, or the Pauky thing, Ping, whatever. You know, there are a lot of different names, but it's just actually like an Android box. And yeah, you can just pick it up for very cheap. And what you can do is add an SD card to it. That is something we're going to talk about later. But just take a close look at the box itself. So is the GT King outdated? Yeah, to be honest, I don't think so, because nothing really happened. I also released my GT King review. GT King 2 review, and there is also the Pro version. Later on I'm doing a side-by-side in-depth comparison with 3, just to show you which one you should pick up if you're interested in one of these boxes, but also when it comes to EmuELEC. So recently I basically made a video about the GT King 2, but we're going to talk about the old one. And they have one thing in similar, and that's basically we do have this freaking plastic case. It's not a very bad thing. I really love the light up eyes. I think it's still a very cool feature. But the only thing is the plastic fantastic case. I wish they added more cooling feature to this, like the Pro. Then we'll have two USB ports over here. Then we have the SD card, or the micro SD card input. We then have at the back an USB, a third port, and USB 2.0, HDMI, RJ45, an optical out, AV out, and the input for the power supply. But there is no, let's say, fourth port. I wish they would do something like that, to have multiple ports, especially if you want to use this thing in game machine. It's so convenient, because you need to slap so much stuff on this. And it is capable of running a lot of Android games on a very high FPS and giving you a very cool experience. But let's talk about the other side of the GT King, the retro emulation. How good is it in 2021? But nowadays we can even use this thing with a 256GB card, or I think there were even people having 512GB. And what you can do with this is enter the EmuELEC zone, making this thing an emulation beast. They're also doing this with the Super Console X King and the Pauky King. There's basically the same thing, but just with a different name. And with this we have so much potential. But let's talk about the emulation part, because with the Beeling GT King you can do some awesome things when it comes to EmuELEC. There are quite some different tutorials out there how you need to use this software. Take consideration, this is just free to use software. There are some companies out there who are using more this same software modified in a Super Console X or something else. But in the end you can just make it yourself, put an SD card, and you're ready to go. Plug it in. Of course, don't forget that you need to have the right firmware for it. It still needs a lot of configuration for getting it perfectly, but in the end you will have yourself a very awesome, badass EmuELEC machine. You can use it with a controller. If you want to use the air remote, for example, you can do that. But yeah, you can navigate through the menu with your controller. If you configure your EmuELEC, it will boot up straight into the software. And it's pretty cool. It takes a couple of seconds to boot up, so the boot sequence is quite fast. And when you're ready, you're done. And you can play and build yourself a retro emulation machine. And I think that's just really cool. It looks similar like the Raspberry Pi, but in the end you can configure and make your own badass machine with the GT King Pro, or the normal edition that we're having here in the video. And what I really like about it, that you not can only play more the later on stuff, the old stuff like DOS, Atari, up to the Sega Dreamcast can be installed on this box in combination with EmuELEC. So let's start off with PSP on the GT King. It doesn't even matter if you're going to load up the app or the PPSSPP from the store, or you're going to use it through RetroArch and download the core this way. In the end, when you're looking at this, you need to do a lot of tweaking, especially with God of War Chains of Olympus, because this game was not running at all or not very well. But when you're looking at other games like Tekken 6, these games are playable, but with some tinkering with the settings, you can see that it runs decent, but it still has a lot of problems and stutters.
You win. Round 2. Fight.
But it was always depending what kind of PP SSPP version you're using, in combination which game you're playing or which level in this case. One of my favorite games to test and play. So without any frame skipping, you can play up to 61 FPS. But I've noticed when you're going to, let's say, get into wild action with some shooting and explosions, you will see the frames absolutely dip into the 50s sometimes. Unfortunately, that's something that is unavoidable because the chip itself is not just powerful enough. And what you will see is that the game runs way better now. But for the people who have no idea what I'm talking about basically, so when you're looking at the previous GT Kings and all the other Android boxes, you can play PlayStation 1 on the original resolution without any problems nowadays. And I mean like the S905, X3 and some other ones like run the PlayStation 1 pretty damn good. And unfortunately with the GT King I was hoping to get a better performance with this chip. And here we get the same performance like the previous models. With the Dream Emulator in combination with Full HD, we do have like an amazing performance with some marvelous Capcom or Soul Calibur. But let's get into the PlayStation Portable because that's basically the most demanding that we can run on this. When it comes to the old school part, like the arcade, Neo Geo, 8-bit, 16-bit, it will run just fine. I think this is not a reason that you need to buy a Pro. It's just a really cool package when it comes to the Pro with the specs, and you can run a lot of games very decently. But some of these games you can run it on a very basic box. So that is not a reason to buy a Pro version. So it's more like what kind of games do you want to play with your box. If you only want to play the really old school stuff, you can basically buy a normal King or even a cheaper box that will run these games nowadays just as great like the Pro. So what I wanted to try is some Daytona with Sega Saturn, and with this system you can see we do have not like the perfect 60 FPS, so frame skip should basically like enable to get like a great performance and a stable FPS. Again, if you don't really mind it and if you don't see the numbers, maybe you don't even notice it. So that is basically what you're going to get with Sega Saturn. It's a quite, let's say, difficult thing to emulate on a box like this. Even with newer chips we're still going to get the same issues. The only thing I just need to do is put my tool bit against the plastic bottom over here, and we can just open it up like that. That's the only thing that we go to get in the inside. Okay, so we do have like some information, but other thing, we need to remove 4 screws over here, so I can basically like open it up. We do have some information on the PCB over here. Here it says like GT King D4X16, and here it said like the S922X 4GB and 64GB for, of course, the storage. What I do like about this is that you can just replace the batteries fairly easy. You can just click it out and be done with it. Let's take a close look at the construction. It's quite interesting. I need to be very careful simply because, yeah, there is a lot of stuff going on over here. You can see the metal plate that basically like transfers the heat from the chip itself to the metal plate. They implemented like a thermal paste, and they also implemented this weird looking plastic. Yeah, I have seen something like this. I have seen it before with the GT King lineup, but every GT King is general slightly different, but also the same. The reason I'm saying this because the Pro has a completely different setup, but the GT King 1 and 2, you will see that we have like the similar things going on. To be honest, I don't know what's going on over here. They are using this double-sided tape that looks like double-sided tape, and they just put some thermal paste on it for conducting the freaking heat. Okay, so I can tell you that's a kind of weird way to do so. Another thing I want to point out, something I've changed sometimes. So some of the thermal paste they're using is completely like different, let's say, substance now. Like it's completely hard, or it's not any, not a lot on it. In the end, like this is not the best way to get like the heat from the chip to the big metal plate. So if you're going to clean this up, you will have basically have the extra opportunity to get better cooling in overall performance. I've seen with different mainboards or different like setups. It's something pretty and crazy. Here we have like the RAM chips in total 4 GB. And let's see if I can clean this up. But I just wanted to give you like a quick look at the construction of this. Like when you're looking at everything, there's very tiny clamps over here that basically hold this shield in place. The construction is, so far I know, unique to, let's say, the GT King. I didn't see it in Android boxes before. So it's quite interesting to see. So the thing that we need to do is like clean everything up, put some different thermal paste on it, and maybe we're going to get some better performance. So over here we do have like the dual antenna situation going on. They put it on the plastic beside the cooling element. And then we have like the cable that goes to the light up eyes here. We can remove it if you want to. The GT King is an amazing box, and I think it's still one of my favorite ones. But is it now my number one? That is something I find very difficult to say. I will later on do a side-by-side comparison with every single GT King at the moment, and I will give you my personal favorite one. It has like some pros and cons that we already talked about many times before, but the biggest one is still like we do have like limitation with PlayStation Portable and 64, stuff like that, and MAME, stuff that we don't have on a mini PC. But I thank you for watching. Consider subscribing, hit that little bell, become one of the Wicked family, and it would be great to see you in the next video. Yeah.